If you shoot 35mm film, you should get into medium format. And in this edition of Jules Voto's Photo Focus, I'm going to tell you why and what you need. Now, I started out in 35mm film back in the early 70s, like most photographers. And eventually I graduated to a medium format camera. First it was a Yashica 124G, and then a Mamiya C330, and finally a Hasselblad. And I shot weddings, opened a studio, shot portraits, did a lot with the Hasselblad. And I'm not saying don't shoot 35mm. I think it's great. I still shoot some 35mm film, primarily digital, primarily shoot digital, but medium format cameras have a special place. So I'm going to talk a little bit about why and exactly what you will need. Now, you could pick up medium format cameras fairly inexpensively, between $100 and $200. This is a Yashica 12 that I only paid $85 for at a thrift store 4 or 5 years ago. And in a recent video, I compared the Yashica to the Mamiya C220, which is also a fairly inexpensive medium format twin lens reflex camera that takes interchangeable lenses. But there are others. So what I really want to talk about is the advantages of medium format. Of course, the negative is bigger. A 2¼ square negative is 2¼ inches by 2¼ inches, compared to a 35mm negative that's 1 inch by approximately 1½ inches. So you don't require as much enlargement to get to 8x10 or 11x14 or any print size for that matter. So the quality is going to be better. The grain is going to be far less. You make an 8x10 print or 11x14 print from a 2¼ negative, from a medium format negative, and you will see virtually no grain. Now, there's not only 2¼ square format medium format cameras, we also have what are called 6x7 cameras. They produce a negative 2¼ inches by 2¾ inches. And they are sometimes referred to as the ideal format because they enlarge right up to 8x10 with no cropping. Whereas with a 2¼ square negative, you're going to need to crop some. But the nice thing with the 2¼ square format is gives you great square prints. And I just love square prints. I love the square format. Many digital cameras today allow you to shoot square. So it is very popular. It was very popular, and I think it's becoming popular again. So that is probably the biggest advantage of medium format, is you get that larger negative. Now, of course, because you're shooting a larger negative, the film is going to be more expensive. A roll of 120 film that will produce 12 2¼ square images, or if you're using a 6x7 camera, it will produce 10 6x7 images. That roll of film costs about $10. A roll of 35mm film that will produce 36 images costs about $11 today. I'm talking about black and white. So it is a little more expensive. You're talking $1 an image for 6x7 and a little less than that if you're shooting 6x6 or 2¼ square. But I think that the advantage is worth it, especially if you're shooting black and white and making your own prints. I had a darkroom for years, and I really like printing from those larger negatives. They just look better. Now, medium format cameras, especially if they have a waist level viewfinder, are a little more difficult to use than a 35mm camera with an eye level prism. Now, many medium format cameras take an accessory prism that makes them shoot a little more like a 35mm camera, but some don't. The Yashicas don't. The only finder you have for the Yashica is the standard waist level finder. The finders are not interchangeable. And it does take some getting used to shoot with the waist level finder. But you get a nice big focusing screen to compose your images. Now, I prefer shooting medium format cameras on a tripod. Even when I did weddings, when I shot portraits, when I did the wedding party groups, family groups, I always had the camera on a tripod. Now, to my knowledge, there are no new medium format film cameras being produced. So you're going to have to buy used. But there are a ton of them on the used market. The ones you're going to pay less money for are the TLRs generally, the Yashicas, the Minoltas, the Mamiyas. Rolleiflexes are going to be more expensive. But I recently did a video on the various twin lens reflex as well as single lens reflex medium format cameras. So I'll put a link in the description below to that video. And also I did a video comparing the Yashica to the Mamiya, and I'll put a link in the description below to that video. And TLRs are less expensive than SLRs. So you could pick one up fairly inexpensively. But they do have, besides the larger negative, they do have some advantages. Number one, the TLRs and some of the single lens reflex medium format cameras have a leaf shutter. Now, the disadvantage of the leaf shutter is usually the top speed is 1/500th of a second. The advantage to the leaf shutter, a big advantage in my opinion, is if you shoot with fill flash outdoors, you could sync your electronic flash up to a 500th of a second. You can't do that with most 35mm cameras. Okay, usually the top speed of the newer ones is maybe a 2/50th of a second. The older ones, a 1/125th of a second, or even a 60th of a second in some cases. The old Nikon F only sync with flash at a 60th of a second. So the camera with the leaf shutter is much more advantageous if you like to do outdoor film flash photography. Now, as some of you may know, I recently purchased this Mamiya C220. It's a twin lens reflex camera that takes interchangeable lenses, and I plan to primarily shoot outdoors with black and white, probably most of the time on a tripod. So I'm not too concerned about flash. But if I was, it's a little more difficult to shoot flash with a twin lens reflex or even a single lens reflex camera because there's no way to mount the flash on the camera. Now, this camera, the Mamiya, doesn't have a shoe, a cold shoe on the side. The Yashica does, but it's not very convenient to mount the flash over here. So what people usually did, and what I did back in the day when shooting with the Hasselblad for weddings, is I had a bracket. And this was a heavily modified strobo frame bracket, which screwed into the bottom of the camera. The flash was mounted up here. I used to use a Lumidyne flash, fully manual flash. This bracket would tilt. I could tilt the flash up or down, although it really didn't need to tilt it down. So I put a plate here that would attach to my Bogan tripod, so I could quickly put the camera on the tripod and quickly take it off. And it worked out really well with the Hasselblad. A bracket like that, and the really good thing with this is it put the flash over the top of the lens and a good distance from the lens. Okay? But a bracket like this would not work well on a twin lens reflex camera with a waist level finder, because you really couldn't get your eye in there to look into the finder. It would work fine with a twin lens reflex or single lens reflex, of course, with a prism finder. But many TLRs, and usually beginners, are going to pick up something like the Yashica that only have a waist level finder. So if you want flash, you're going to need some type of a bracket, and you're going to need a flash that can plug in to the PC outlet on the camera. So that eliminates hot shoe only flashes. And if you plan on doing studio type photography with studio flash, you're going to need a way to fire the flash. Now you could use a cable from the flash to the PC outlet on the camera, or you could use something like this. This is a Pocket Wizard Plus X. Normally I use this on my digital cameras. It has a hot shoe and it will fire the remote flashes. There's another one that I'm attached to the flash. Okay, I'll plug this in to the flash and this remote unit on the camera will fire the flash. They do sell a cable for the Pocket Wizard that will plug into the Pocket Wizard and plug into the PC outlet on the camera. And that would enable you to easily fire your flash if you didn't want to have to run a cable to the flash unit, okay? The only thing is with the Mamiya, there's really nowhere to mount it, so you would need some type of a bracket to mount it to the camera. With the Yashica and some other TLRs, the Rolleiflexes for example, you would just mount it onto the shoe on the flash and then plug it into the camera. Now another thing you're going to need is a handheld meter, because most medium format cameras do not have a meter built in. Some with prism finders, with an accessory prism finder, do have a meter in the finder. Now this Yashica has a meter, however the one on this particular model does not work. So I suggest a handheld meter. This Mamiya does not, however there are prism finders for the Mamiya that do have a built-in meter. So you need a handheld meter. Now this particular model is a Sekonic Flashmate L308X. I don't believe this model is made any longer, and I forget what I paid for this, around $200. And there are similar meters that are available in the $200 to $300 range. Now this meter will meter incident light with this dome in place here, which is light falling on the subject. It will also meter flash that way. Or it meters reflective, and you just point it at your subject and you get a reading and transfer that reading to the camera. So a little more inconvenient with a medium format camera. However, it forces you to take your time. And that's another advantage of medium format. It forces you to slow down. Most medium format cameras do not have an available motor drive. Some that do, it's usually 1 frame a second, so you're not machine gunning like you would with a 35mm SLR or digital camera today that you could shoot 30 frames a second. So it really forces you to slow down, to take your time, to think about each image. And also because of the cost, because we're looking at, as I said, a 12 exposure roll on a 2 1/4 square camera, you're looking at almost $1 every time you press that shutter release. So you're going to slow down. And I think that makes you a better photographer. So I really think if you shoot 35mm, give a medium format camera a try. I think you will like it. And if you print your own, obviously you need an enlarger that can handle the 2 1/4 negatives, either 2 1/4 square or 2 1/4 by 2 3/4. But many enlargers can handle medium format negatives. And I think you'll be pleasantly surprised when you start making prints from medium format film. Now, one other thing let me just mention, as far as a TLR, because you're viewing from the upper viewing lens, there's no blackout when you press the shutter release like you would have with a 35mm camera. So if you have any questions or comments on this video, please leave them in the comments below. I always try to respond to all questions and comments. And if you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. I usually publish a new video every Monday morning and Wednesday morning at 11 a.m. Eastern Time. So thanks for watching, and I will talk to you soon.